Okay, so I want to start today with a phrase that frankly sounds incredibly arrogant.
Oh, I think I know the one.
Yeah, it sounds like something like a villain in a movie would say right before they get taken down by the hero.
Right.
But it's actually the core thesis of one of the most successful investors in Silicon Valley history.
Competition is for losers.
Competition is for losers, which just triggers this visceral reaction, doesn't it?
It really does.
Right.
Because, we are trained from day one, literally from kindergarten sports to high school grades to capitalism itself. The competition is good.
Right. It makes us stronger. It drives prices down. It's the American way.
Exactly. And here is Peter Thiel saying, no, actually, if you are competing, you are failing.
Which is exactly why we need to do this deep dive today.
Yeah.
We are looking at 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. And look, a lot of people have read the summaries. They know the quotes.
Yeah, they've seen the memes.
Exactly. But today we're doing something a little different. We're going to act as your executive analysts and treat this book and his original Stanford class notes, which we have here, as an actionable playbook for now.
Right, because the goal isn't just to debate philosophy. It's to figure out how do you actually build a company that completely escapes competition.
And to do that, we've got a lot of ground to cover. We're going to hit a 12-point TLDR framework. We've got the famous 0 to 1 idea checklist, and we're going to break down the dead zone of sales, which, man, it destroys so many startups.
It really does. Oh, we're also going to look at the founder paradox, which explains why the people who build these massive companies are usually a little weird.
Weird is putting it politely based on some of the charts we've got. But let's actually just start by firing off that 12-bullet TLDR, just to prime the brain.
Let's do it, rapid fire. I'll take the first one. Point 1, 0 to 1 is greater than 1 to n. Vertical progress beats horizontal progress.
Point 2, monopoly is the goal. Perfect competition destroys profits.
Point 3 is the lie. Monopolies pretend they have competition to avoid regulators.
And competitors pretend they are unique to sound special. Love that one. Point 4, proprietary tech. It has to be 10 times better than the closest substitute. Not 10%, 10 times.
Point 5, network effects. You have to start with a tiny niche market that you can completely dominate.
Point 6 is economies of scale. Your business has to get stronger and cheaper to run as it gets bigger.
Point 7, branding. It's strong, but it cannot fix a broken product.
Point 8, the secret. What important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Point 9 is the power law. Returns are not normal. A tiny handful of companies outperform all the others combined.
Point 10, distribution is queen. Poor sales will kill a great product. You've got to avoid the dead zone.
Point 11, the founder paradox. Founders have fat-tailed trait distributions. They're extreme.
And point 12, definite optimism. You need a concrete plan for the future, not just a vague hope that things will get better.
Okay, so that's the playbook at a glance.
Yeah.
But to actually use it, we need to unpack the foundation, which is that first point 0 to 1 versus 1 to n.
Yeah, help me visualize this, because looking at the notes, it really feels like the core of everything else we're going to talk about.
It absolutely is. So imagine a graph. On the horizontal axis, the x-axis, you have 1 to n. Thiel calls this extensive progress.
Which basically means copying things that already work.
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah.
The classic example in the notes is typewriters. 1 to n progress is taking one typewriter and building 100 of them, or taking a typewriter that works in New York and shipping it to Shanghai.
So globalization, scaling what we already know.
Right, it's globalization, scaling. And look, it's necessary, but it's entirely horizontal. You aren't doing anything new, you're just spreading what already exists.
Which is exactly what most businesses do, right? You see a coffee shop making money, so you open a coffee shop across the street.
Exactly. And what does that lead to?
Competition.
Competition. You are fighting for the exact same customers with the exact same product. But then you look at the y-axis, the vertical axis, that is 0 to 1. Intensive progress.
With its actual technology.
Yes. So that's not building 100 typewriters. That's looking at a typewriter and building a word processor.
Right. You've gone from 0, something that literally didn't exist, to 1.
You've created a step function change. And the argument here is that this is the only place where massive generational value is created. If you were just moving horizontally, you were basically just a commodity.
There's a graph in the source material titled The Future of Strong AI that connects right to this. It's this flat line that just suddenly shoots straight up.
Ah, the singularity graph.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit terrifying, but it completely illustrates the point. Human progress isn't this slow, steady hill climb. It's flat for a long time, and then someone hits a 0 to 1 moment, like the steam engine or the internet or AI, and the line just goes vertical.
So if you're listening to this and you're building a business, you have to look in the mirror and ask, am I just adding to the horizontal noise, or am I actually creating a vertical leap?
Which brings us perfectly to the most controversial part of this whole playbook, the monopoly strategy.
Yeah, this is where people start getting uncomfortable.
Understandably so.
Yeah, because when I hear Monopoly, I think of the board game. Guys in top hats, price fixing the government, breaking up Standard Oil. It's a dirty word.
Legally speaking, sure. But the source material is very careful to distinguish illegal bullying from what they call a creative monopoly.
Creative monopoly.
Right. It means you are just so good at what you do. Your solution is so distinct and 10x better that no other firm can even offer a close substitute.
Okay, so you aren't artificially preventing competition. You're just so unique that competition is irrelevant.
Exactly. And there are these great charts in the notes comparing perception versus reality. Firm A and Firm B. It totally exposes how companies lie to us.
Oh, the circles. Yeah, break down the difference between how a monopoly talks and how a normal competitor talks.
So imagine a perfectly competitive market. Let's say a restaurant in San Francisco. Margins are razor thin. If you raise your burger price by $1, people just go next door. You have zero pricing power.
It's a grind. You're just fighting for scraps every day.
So what do those non-monopolies do? They lie. They try to convince investors they're entirely unique. They define their market so narrowly, they say, look, we are the only British-themed food truck in this specific parking lot.
They manufacture a fake monopoly.
Right, to seem special. But then look at actual monopolies. Look at Google.
Which owns like, what, 90% of the search market?
Basically, it's a monopoly by any functional definition. But if Google walked into a government hearing and said, yep, we own 90% of search, they'd get regulated into oblivion immediately.
So they have to lie too.
But they lie in the exact opposite direction. They try to sound like they are tiny players in a terrifyingly huge competitive ocean.
So how do they frame it?
They say, look, we aren't a search company. We are an advertising company. And the global advertising market is nearly $1 trillion. So we're just a tiny little slice of this massive pie. Look at all this competition we have.
That is so fascinating. The loser companies pretend to be unique to feel special, and the winner companies pretend to be totally normal to avoid scrutiny.
That is the rule. And the actionable takeaway for you listening right now is about how you launch. The biggest mistake founders make is trying to boil the ocean.
Trying to capture 1% of $1 trillion market.
Oh yeah, the classic. If we just get 1% of China, we're billionaires pitch. It never works. The playbook says do the exact opposite. Dominate a tiny market first.
Which is exactly what Facebook did.
Perfect example. Mark Zuckerberg didn't launch by trying to connect the entire Earth. He started by connecting Harvard.
A tiny lockdown ecosystem.
Right. He got to 0 to 1 right
Yeah.
there. He established an absolute monopoly on that one campus. Then he went to Yale, then other schools, then eventually the world.
So start small and on, monopolize that specific niche, and then expand. Don't launch into a massive market where you're just instantly swimming with sharks.
Exactly. Because if you're fighting for market share on day one, you do not have a 0 to 1 idea.
Okay, so let's say you are listening and you have an idea. You want to know if it's actually 0 to 1 or just a 1 to N copycat. We pulled together the idea checklist from the notes, specifically from the section where they dissect the clean tech crash of the 2000s.
Oh man, the clean tech crash, that was an absolute bloodbath.
The chart showing the Renix Renewable Energy Index just cratering while the NASDAQ Q recovers is brutal to look at.
Yeah, the source material argues they failed because they ignored some very basic questions.
Right, so we synthesized this into 10 questions for the playbook. Let's vet a few of the biggest ones, starting with the engineering question.
This is the 10x rule. Is your technology a massive breakthrough? The benchmark is it has to be 10 times better than the closest substitute.
And we really mean 10 times, not 10% cheaper or a little faster.
No, because 10% doesn't change behavior. Clean tech failed, largely because in 2008, solar panels were maybe 20% greener than fossil fuels, but they cost twice as much.
Which is not a breakthrough.
Right, it's a marginal improvement.
Yeah.
To get people to completely switch their habits, especially if it costs money, you need a 10x leap. Like moving from snail mail to email. That wasn't 10% faster, it was a million times faster.
Okay, so 10x tech. Next is the timing question.
Is now actually the right time? Clean tech crashed because the tech wasn't economically viable, yet it was just pure hype. Being too early is functionally the exact same as being wrong.
Oof, that's a tough pill to swallow. Let's look at the people question. And I have to say the notes here are pretty harsh on typical corporate structures.
Oh, you're looking at the biotech versus software chart?
Yeah, it describes the typical biotech team as high-salaried, unaligned lab drones. Lab drones.
It's aggressive. But contrast that with the software ideal in the chart, which is committed entrepreneurial hackers. The underlying point isn't really about biology versus coding. It's about alignment.
Right. In a 0 to 1 startup, you need a team that is borderline cult-like. Everyone has to be completely obsessed with the mission. If people are just punching a clock as consultants, you will not innovate fast enough. We'll actually touch more on the cult aspect when we get to founders, but I want to skip down to the secret question because this really feels like the philosophical heart of the whole playbook.
It is. The question is simply, what important truth do very few people agree with you on?
Which sounds like a riddle.
It functions as a filter for value.
Okay.
If you ask someone, hey, what's a good business to start right now? And they say, oh, an AI wrapper or a coffee shop, that is not a secret. Everybody knows that.
Right.
If everyone already agrees with you, all the profit has already been competed away.
Yeah.
You're looking for something that the world thinks is dumb or impossible or flat out wrong, but is actually true.
The classic example is Airbnb, right? Strangers will gladly let other strangers sleep in their spare bedrooms. In 2008, that sounded like an actual murder plot.
Exactly. It sounded crazy. That was the secret. If you don't know something that others don't, you're just competing.
Okay, I want to pivot to execution now. Because you can have the best secret and you can have true 10x tech, but you can still completely fail. And the notes highlight this with something called the sales dead zone.
Which is arguably the most practical chart in the entire deck. This concept saves companies from bankruptcy.
So visualize this dead zone for us.
Okay, imagine a graph that compares the price of your product to the cost of getting a customer, your CAC.
Yeah.
On the far left, you have viral marketing. Super low price, maybe $1 or totally free. Think WhatsApp or Instagram.
Right, you don't have a sales team for Instagram. It spreads purely because users invite other users.
The product distributes itself.
Mhm.
Now, on the far right of the graph, you have complex sales. This is Palantir, SpaceX, Boeing. The product costs $10 million or $100 million.
So for that, you literally have the CEO flying out on a jet to have dinner with a general to close one deal.
Yeah. Exactly. It's high touch, incredibly high cost, but the massive price tag easily covers it. But right in the middle of those two extremes, that is the dead zone.
Break down the math on that. Like, what numbers are we talking about? Let's use a B2B case.
Sure, let's look at B2B software, small business SaaS. Say you build a product and sell it for $1,000 a year to local mom-and-pop bakeries.
Okay, sounds like a solid business.
The problem is mom-and-pop bakeries don't hang out on tech Twitter all day, so your product won't go viral. You actually have to pick up the phone and call them. You have to explain the software.
But a decent salesperson costs, what, 80, 100 grand a year?
Easily.
Mhm.
So if your product only brings in $1,000, you literally cannot afford to pay a human being to sell it. The math fundamentally breaks.
You're stuck. You're too cheap to afford a sales rep, but too complex for organic viral growth.
And that right there is where startups go to die.
Yeah.
So the playbook rule for B2B is you have to explicitly choose your distribution. Either you automate everything so no humans are involved, like Slack or Zoom, doing product-led growth, or you charge enough, usually 10 to 20 grand minimum, so you can afford a real sales motion. Do not get caught in the middle.
That is huge for anyone running a SaaS company. Check your pricing model today. Are you in the dead zone?
And look, this concept totally connects to the power law too.
Yes. Let's talk about that because there are two graphs here. The normal distribution, which is the standard bell curve, and the power law, which is the J curve.
Right, we were all taught the bell curve in school. Most things are average, grades are average, heights are average. But in business specifically, in venture capital and digital media, the world follows a power law.
Meaning the winner takes almost everything.
Correct. In a venture fund, one single company, the Facebook or the Uber of that fund, will return more money than all the other companies in the entire portfolio combined.
Which explains why VCs act the way they do. They don't want a company that creates a nice, safe 2x return. Mathematically, a nice return is totally irrelevant to them. They need a grand slam.
Exactly. And this applies perfectly to creator businesses too.
Let's do a creator case because a lot of people listening are building digital businesses.
Yeah, if you are a podcaster or you run a YouTube channel, you are living in a power law reality. The average podcast gets basically 0 listeners, but the top 1% get tens of millions.
It's extreme, so your strategy has to account for that. You can't just aim for good enough.
You absolutely cannot aim for the middle. Which brings us right back to the monopoly strategy. If you're launching a YouTube channel, you shouldn't try to be a general talk show for everyone. You need a secret.
Right.
You need a specific, controversial, or highly unique angle that captures a small, obsessive audience. Maybe you're building a highly paid private community for a very specific type of data scientist.
You want to be a monopoly for 1,000 people before you try to compete for 1,000,000.
That's exactly it. Dominate the niche.
I love that. A monopoly for 1,000 people. Very actionable. Now, speaking of the people who actually pulled this off, we have to talk about the founders themselves. Because this founder distribution chart explains a lot about Silicon Valley culture.
It's the inverse bell curve. Normal people sit right in the middle. We have average social skills, average risk tolerance. But 0 to 1 founders sit on the fat tails.
The chart lists these trait pairings that are completely contradictory, like they are insiders and outsiders at the exact same time. Disagreeable, but charismatic, poor and rich.
Just look at the visual examples in the notes. You have a picture of Richard Branson literally holding a woman upside down. You have Lady Gaga. You have the stark contrast of Bill Gates' teenage mugshot right next to his Time magazine cover.
Right, the whole point being these are not well-rounded corporate citizens.
No, not at all. A well-rounded person doesn't start a 0 to 1 company. A well-rounded person tries to fit in.
They don't want to rock the boat.
Exactly. To
Yep.
build something entirely new, you have to be willing to be highly disagreeable. You have to be okay with looking completely wrong to the general public for a very long time.
The notes mention the scapegoat mechanism here, which is fascinating. Society essentially worships these extreme people when they win, but tears them down instantly the second they stumble.
It's an ancient dynamic. We want kings to lead us, but we secretly love sacrificing them to restore the normal order. Just think about Elon Musk or Steve Jobs. They are the ultimate fat-tail founders. Genius and crazy, insider and outsider.
We love them, we hate them.
Right, but you cannot deny they are 0 to 1 thinkers.
So the practical lesson for the listener here, say if they are hiring a CEO or trying to find a co-founder, is what? Don't look for the person with the flawless resume and the perfectly tailored suit.
Look for the spiky person. Look for the obsessive weirdo. Being unbalanced is actually a feature, not a bug, when your entire goal is to break the status quo.
Okay, we've covered the philosophy, we hit the checklist, we talked about the sales traps and the power law. I want to land this plane with the 7-day action plan we promised.
Let's do it.
A way for the listener to execute a true 0 to 1 reset on their own business? Let's break it down day by day. Day 1, the secret.
You need to sit down and write out what is an important truth I believe that very few people agree with me on. And honestly, if you can't answer this, stop right there. You don't have a startup idea yet. You just have a small business idea.
Day 2, the niche.
Shrink your target market.
Oh.
Stop trying to boil the ocean. Identify a small, highly specific group of people like the eBay power sellers were for PayPal that you can serve perfectly. Because if you aren't a monopoly to someone, you are nobody to everyone.
Day 3, the 10x check.
Be brutally honest with yourself here. Is your solution actually 10 times better? Or is it just 10% better? If it's 10%, go back to research and development. You'll die in the sales process if the product isn't visibly, undeniably superior.
Day 4, the team audit.
Look at your co-founders or your early hires. Are they acting like consultants just looking for a safe paycheck? Or are they hackers who are completely obsessed with the problem? Remember, you need a cult, not a committee.
Day 5, the distribution strategy.
Pull up that dead zone chart. Calculate your customer acquisition cost versus your price point. If you are stuck in the middle, you have to change your price or change your product immediately.
Day 6, the definite plan.
This goes back to the definite versus indefinite matrix in the notes. Stop diversifying your focus. Stop saying, oh, we'll keep our options open. Use power law thinking. Pick the one single thing that will actually move the needle and put all your wood behind that arrow.
And finally, day 7, the pitch.
Frame your narrative. Do not go out and pitch yourself by saying we are competing with company X to be the best. Pitch yourself by saying we are the absolute only ones doing Y. You have to escape competition entirely.
We're the absolute only ones doing Y. That is the goal.
That is the pure essence of a monopoly.
Now, before we sign off, I want to leave the listener with one final thought from the source material. And it builds on that definite optimism point we just mentioned.
Oh, this is my favorite quadrant in the whole framework. Thiel argues that right now as a society, we live in indefinite optimism,
Meaning what exactly?
meaning we inherently think the future is going to be better, so we're optimistic, but we have absolutely no idea how it will happen, so we act passively. We invest in index funds. We get generic law degrees just to keep our options open. We're basically just waiting around for the future to arrive.
Indefinite optimism is the opposite of that.
Definite optimism was the Apollo program. It was the Empire State Building being built in literally 1 year. It's having a highly concrete plan and forcing it into existence.
Right. We didn't just hope vaguely that we'd end up on the moon. We built a massive explicit roadmap to get there.
Exactly. So the real challenge to the listener is this. Can you shift your own mindset from indefinite to definite? Can you stop copying what works, stop hedging your bets, and actually design the future you want to see?
Stop copying, start building. I think that's the perfect way to wrap up the playbook. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
My pleasure. Go build something new.